the machines have advantages because exact reasons that people think they have a disadvantage. The fact that you don't have to stabilize means you can put more of your energy into just pushing or pulling or whatever it is that you're doing. And there aren't energy leaks that are used to try to balance it over your body or balance it against gravity or keep it in the correct plane of motion, right? All those things are taking energy away from just the pure push or pull that you're trying to accomplish.
We are about to launch.
Truth Not Trends. What's up, everybody? Truth Not Trends, TNT in the house. What's going on, people? This is the podcast where we help you maximize your strength as safely and efficiently as possible. My name is Jesse Schmidt. I've been a strength coach for what? Oh my God, 2,180 days. 2,180 days. Let me just say that one more time. And I did. My name is Liam Bauer, and I've been a strength coach for 35 years and counting. That's a lot of years. That's not as many days, but enough. Spicy meatball. Maybe catch up eventually. People, today we are bringing you a solo round about what is better, machines or free weights. And spoiler alert, we have a special guest today from one of our clients, Shauna Jones. Shauna Jones was kind enough to join us briefly as she stopped by the studio, and we threw her into the chair and said, "You are now a guest on the podcast." Shauna's fantastic. She's been training with TNT for about a year and a half, so she's a seasoned veteran at this point, and we scooped her up. She gave us some good things to ponder in this episode. Indeed, she did. So we hope that you enjoy that. Before you listen to this episode, we recommend, as a thank you, we want to give you our free nutrition and training guide. All you have to do is go to tntstrength.com, punch in your email. You'll get a PDF. You're going to be on the road to getting great strength and body composition gains. That's right. And while you're there, you got to check out our new store where we feature some of our favorite supplements, and they're right there ready for you. We have, of course, whey protein. We've got a great fish oil product. We've got probiotics, give that gut health in order. We've got a little creatine monohydrate and some vitamin K2 and D3. So 5 supplements that we think are awesome, and they're all right there ready for your taking. There you go. At TNT Strength, we recommend a well-rounded whole foods diet, but if you have some gaps in your nutrition, we got your back with these supplements. That's right. Without further ado, we hope you enjoyed this solo round plus one. That's right, about machines versus free weights.
That's why I like working out with you guys. And that's why everybody should work out with TNT. Because you cater and you build this around each individual person and you meet them where they're at.
So we're here in the TNT Strength studio, and today we have special guest and client extraordinaire, Shauna Jones. Shauna Jones.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Shauna, welcome to the TNT Strength podcast. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself. How long have you been training with us? Who are you? What do you do? What's your profession? That sort of any fun fact about yourself. Fun fact.
Fun facts. All right. Well, I have been training with TNT. Gosh, I think it's been about a year and a half now.
It's been
a good one.
Stretch.
It's been awesome. And I work in the East Bay. I'm a realtor, and I'm also a relationship coach. I'm also a twin. There's another fun fact.
Fun fact. Forget about the twin.
Yeah.
Fun fact. When are we going to meet your twin?
How do you know you're not meeting her?
Whoa. Nice.
Yeah.
Curveball.
I know.
You guys have been getting free workouts with while taking turns. You go, I'll go. You.
That's a brilliant idea. Thank you.
Well, so me and Liam, we're getting ready. We're getting geared up to start recording about this podcast. And our topic today is what's better, machines or free weights, which is like a classic like gym debate. And Shauna happened to walk by, and we're curious to see what her answer would be, because depending on which client we ask, we probably would get a bunch of different answers. So what was your answer? So my specific question to you, Shauna, was what's better for building strength, machines or free weights? And what was your answer?
I probably answered too quickly now that I hear your question again, but I answered free weights only because when I work on machines, even though they're challenging for me, I feel like it's more challenging when I'm using my own body weight or free weights.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is a really, really interesting and probably more common response to that question, which is exactly why we asked it. We were almost expecting you to say the opposite because at the TNT studio, we do skew toward using Nautilus machines more often than other stuff, but we do mix in a variety of different tools.
Yes.
We got them all. We got all the tools over here. We got all the tools. So this is a debate that will never die. And people, there's so much bro science around this that it just, the debate can be hilarious. And if you are, dialed in on the research around strength training, like we are, it can be very frustrating because not very many of the arguments are logical or hold up to science. And so we dug out a couple of meta analyses. So just these analyses of a bunch of different studies that looked at this exact issue. And we're going to talk about some of those things today.
Interesting too, because a lot of times, these days it gets pretty nuanced with the tools. So you said body weight and free weights, but a lot of people will think of them as completely separate things too. Free weights is one thing. Using your body as the resistance is a totally separate thing. And then using machines is yet again a separate thing, right? There's all these different little toolboxes, if you will. And you got the kettlebells. And
I think for me,
people out there
feels more of a mental thing too. Like if I have a machine that I'm working against and something were to happen, right? Like my mind is going, oh, I'm safer on this machine because it's going to catch the weight if I drop it or something like that. So I think it's also connected to my mental ability. If I'm holding myself backwards, on the wall, the likelihood of me letting go and falling feels more scary or more
right, like if you were doing a suspension thing where you're
exactly
a
machine, I'm like, oh, I feel like I could let this go. It's going to make a loud bang and a crash, but I know that I'm not dropping the weight on my foot or I'm not.
Yep.
So there's a mental thing, I think, connected to that as well.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely. So there, we could parse that a little bit. One of the arguments that people make when they assume that free weights are inherently more effective for building strength than machines is they have this argument for stabilizer muscles, right? It feels unstable. And for that reason, it is harder, there's actually truth to that, right? So when we're using a machine is operating on a fixed path. So we're not having to, right? If I'm doing a barbell bicep curl, I'm having to, my hips might be doing something to help or hurt the movement. My shoulders might be doing something, even though it's just supposed to be my biceps. Right. So that's causing my brain to have to work a little bit harder, which doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to build more strength because of that or build strength more efficiently because of that. It just means it's a little bit more complex of a movement.
Yeah, you have to pay more attention to what you're doing.
There's more technique in manipulating the particular tools depending on how free, to use that term, they are.
Sometimes even when I'm standing and using a weight, if I do just a slight adjustment, I feel all the difference. Versus in the machine, you're always sitting in that same position.
Yeah, and again, you could be, out of position in a machine, right? They all have, but that's one of the classic arguments is just you mentioned is more little stabilizer muscles or just the fact that you have to stabilize is somehow better. And again, that's purely a skill thing. So it isn't better unless you require that skill, right? And very few people require the skill of moving free weights through the world.
Meaning if an example of that would be you probably don't do this super often, but you could do this here where, you're doing a free weighted barbell bench press. Do that super often because, right, you have to have somebody spot you if you're really going to work as hard as you can. Because if you don't have a spotter, you'll just drop the bar on yourself when you have reached muscular fatigue, which we know you work very hard and you reach that fatigue in every set. So, but one of the important things to point out, just to get a little bit nerdy, a brief nerd out, is that, when it comes to this argument about, the stabilizer muscles working because it's unstable, because you're shaky, right? You're using the barbell or the dumbbell, so your body's shaking, right? We recruit muscle based on the intensity of the exercise we're doing, not based on like instability of it, right? That's one of the major reasons why we train to muscular fatigue, or sometimes we call it muscular success, right? Trying to do as many reps as you can with good technique until we can't do any anymore. So that is actually, regardless of whether you're using a machine or a free weight, the intensity of the exercise is going to be the thing that determines the productivity of the exercise,
Right.
not the instability of it. So people tend to conflate those two ideas. They think that the challenge and the complexity of the instability inherently makes it better for whatever reason, which it does make it more challenging, doesn't necessarily make it a more effective exercise in terms of building strength.
Yeah. So, I mean, part of that, the terms I use for those things is like energy leaks, right? So the truth is, in my mind, that if you want to train for pure strength, the machines have advantages because the exact reasons that people think they have a disadvantage. The fact that you don't have to stabilize means you can put more of your energy into just pushing or pulling or whatever it is that you're doing. And there aren't energy leaks that are used to try to balance it over your body or balance it against gravity or keep it in the correct plane of motion, right? All those things are taking energy away from just the pure push or pull that you're trying to accomplish.
That's a good point. Because it also, I feel like, connecting to the brain again, it's also pulling you away a little bit when you're having to really like monitor what's happening.
Yeah, for sure. What's my elbow doing?
Versus machine, you're just like, I can be thoughtless and just do it.
Exactly. And that's, like going back, I've talked about this in our podcast many times. My original certification I got as a trainer was through NASM. And the NASM teaches trainers to put people in unstable environments, right? So literally, when I first started training clients, I was putting them on an upside down Bosu ball and having them squat, which is dangerous because you could just fall off and break your ankle easily.
Yeah.
And because of the unstable environment, it actually makes it harder to build strength. And so I was having people do these funny exercises that made them unstable and actually prevented them from building strength, when I could have just been doing what we do now with almost everybody at TNT, which is we launch them into this onboarding program where they're building strength. They're just going to those machine exercises usually for, their first 6 or 12 weeks. And they're immediately just like building a really strong base of strength. And then we can sort of get into, we can introduce some instability if they want to. But a lot of people just stick with the novelist stuff because they like they feel that they've gotten so much stronger. And
Me, definitely.
Yeah.
I prefer it over when you guys bring me to the other side.
yeah,
The others that don't stop. Exactly. I'm like, no.
Yeah. So that balance is going to always be a leak, right? An energy leak for just most people. Because why are we trying to we want to get strong because it's good to be stronger in all other activities, right? It carries over to the stuff that we do in the world, activities of daily living, if you will. But again, if you're not a specific skill athlete, like someone who's a power lifter, who literally their exercise that they do compete in is a bench press, then they have many, many skills within the bench press to acquire that are very specific to the sport. Same thing with Olympic weightlifting, where they have to move a barbell from A to B in a very specific pattern. Those skills are inherent in that sport. Outside of that, for normal people who are not competing in those sports, there's like zero reason that they need to worry about those things. They just want general strength that they can then apply when they pick up the kitty litter and carry the groceries and, push and pull things in the world and put their luggage in the overhead bin. And it isn't going to be something that you're worried about, that specificity. Barbell squats is like a big one, right? Like, it's always considered the king of exercises. Literally, people still will say that every day, like, you have to do it or else you're not really an athlete or you're not really strong or you're not. And again, it's irrelevant unless you need it, right? You're competing in that thing. Otherwise, there's no reason why you ever need to do a barbell squat your entire life. You can get just as strong and never have done one.
Thank you, Liam, because if Jesse or Taylor or Rosie ever ask me to do that, I'll just refer to that comment. Said.
The other problem with barbell squats, as an example, is, if you think of your spine, right, as like a very, very skinny pyramid, your base of your spine and your pelvis, right, it comes together as the biggest vertebrae. And as you go up towards your skull, or the smallest vertebrae, right? So it's a very, very narrow, and you're stacking now an object on top of that, the skinniest part of that pyramid, you're stacking an object that needs to be balanced on top of there, right? So it's very unstable. You have to control that. All that tilting force, again, is like an energy leak and potential problems. When we remove the instability, now we can focus all of our energy on just pushing against the load resistance, which comes from gravity, right? Or pulling or whatever. And we don't have to worry about that.
Exactly. It probably prevents more injury potential too.
The other big argument, right, is that somehow it carries over into, well, I'm a soccer player, right? And I need balance, or I need these things because I'm, or hockey, whatever, insert sport. The only way to get good at those is to practice the sport itself, right? Go practice soccer, the specific movements that you do, and then you get as strong as possible. The analogy I always use is, if you have a car with a crappy little 2-liter engine in it, and it can only go so fast, and then I sneak in at night, I put like a 4-liter engine in your car. When you step on the gas, you notice it's more powerful, it goes up the hill, but it didn't make you a better driver, right? So unless you know how to drive that car, you have to practice the skill of driving, which is separate from how big your engine is, right?
So we started talking about, we're talking about the big question is what's better, machines or free weights, right? And so now we've covered what's more effective for building strength. And we're starting there are a couple things Taku has sort of touched on here. One is skill building, which we can get into. Let's start with safety, right? So that was the balancing the bar at the top of the pyramid thing. I've had many clients who were great at squatting, either because they had already had good technique that they'd worked on themselves before they started working with me, or I helped them become a better squatter. And squatting with a barbell on your back is something that takes time to get good at. It's a full body exercise. You need thoracic tension. You need neutral wrists. You need a neutral spine. You need to be able to squat deeply without pain in your back and all this, and people have, even though our bodies are generally the same, people's squatting pattern looks differently. So you have to modify certain things. So bottom line is squatting works really well for certain people, and it works really poorly for other people. And going back to the idea of building strength, I definitely in my career now have unfortunately wasted a fair amount of time with people because I thought at that point in time that squatting was essential to building strength. And so they were a person who just, the technique didn't come easily to them, or they just didn't have the strength built up to really even be able to squat with just a bar on their back. But I had it stuck in my mind, you've got to do this, instead of just putting them in a leg press where they could easily, simply, right, just be, building strength. And so, it's to zoom out and look at this big question of like, what's better overall, machines or free weights? Well, how about we answer a different question, which is what's better for each individual person, a specific machine exercise or a specific free weight exercise, right? So for a person who has trouble squatting the bar because their knees cave in and their back rounds and basically it just looks, and feels terrible, a barbell back squat is probably not the right exercise for them, right? But a leg press could be a great exercise for them, leg extension, right? And so in that situation, a machine is probably the way to go. For a person who's got great squatting technique and they love to squat, personal preference, which is another thing we can talk about, the squat is probably the right decision. We had a guy walk in off the street the other day and he's just like, I like to deadlift and squat. And we're like, great, we have a straight bar, we have a trap bar, we have a
blaster, whatever it's called. Oh,
the leg blaster, yeah. We have
it does blaster.
It does blaster. I'm still feeling big, at least today. So really, like we need to ask a more nuanced question of it's kind of like nutrition too. There's no universal law of like what's the best food to eat, right? Like certain foods work really well for certain individuals and certain, other foods don't work well for those same individuals.
That's why I like working out with you guys. And that's why everybody should work out with TNT because it's true, because you cater and you build this around each individual person and you meet them where they're at. And I think that's important to acknowledge.
Thanks, Shauna. That was a really nice testimonial.
There we go. Unprompted, unsolicited,
unfiltered.
I'm just kidding.
I'm not holding up key cards.
Oh, now T's here, so I should probably go.
Right on cue.
Dr.
Right on
Jones.
time.
Well, Shauna, thank you so much for stopping by. It's really our privilege to be able to have this conversation with you and to be able to train with you. And we appreciate having you here. And
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This was fun. I appreciate it.
that was fun.
Now I'm going to go work out.
Okay, have fun.
Hey, what are those guys doing here? Whenever I feel like I'm stalling out on my bench press, I know I need a new strength curve. Whether you're stalling out on the road or stalling out in the gym, you need something with great engineering. That's right. And so look for the pendulum. Pendulum. Not just your average strength machines. No, they have smooth strength curves, amazing rigidity. And did we mention the engineering's fantastic? That's right. Not to mention, they come in cool colors. Like red and silver. That was kind of weird. What was that all about? Back to the interview.
So there we go. We've touched on a couple important points here. One of those that we just covered is, exercise selection. We should talk about that. And maybe even before. Here's the funny thing about putting machines and free weights into two kind of like binary categories is, well, you tell me, what's a machine? Is it, if you're loading plates onto a machine, is it still a machine? If you something like the Harambe system, it's got a bar, but it's also got resistance bands. So is that a machine or is that free weights? Or is it resistance bands? It's something totally different.
Yeah. The other thing that you'll find is a lot of times, it's funny that you use that question as like if you load the plates on the machine. And interesting is I've actually heard the guys would be like, oh no, free weights are good, machines are bad. But then we go, what about like hammer strength?
Right.
Oh, those are okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
they count like as free weights, right? Because you have to load
a plate onto it.
Right. And there isn't a preset limit, right? Like there's not a stack.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and they'll realize that like literally Nautilus came out with a line of equipment that's selectorized, where you just put the pin in, and the exact same machines where you put a plate on instead of putting the pin in on the weight stack.
Yeah.
Literally the exact same machine. It just looks different.
Yeah. So there's those guys who will be like, oh, well, that is not, I don't consider that to be a machine, right? Because I can load what I want on.
Right. Or you can think about like a Smith rack, right? So I'm a hardcore like barbell squatter, and you got to squat with a barbell to get strong. That's what I think. Is a Smith squat, is that a free weight or a machine?
Yeah.
Probably they put it in the machine category.
And my opinion is that this argument didn't exist, honestly, until Nautilus came on the scene. Like free weights were first, but machines have been around for a long time in one form or another. There's been cable pulley systems, there's been different type, right? And people just used them. Whatever was available, they used the tools that were there. And this is still happening. But when Nautilus came and like exploded onto the scene, started getting attention and everything, it made all the people that sold barbells nervous, right? And because suddenly this guy was taking away business, taking away interest in their tool. And that's honestly, I think, when they started trying to come up with these arguments of why free weights were better. Before that time, people just used whatever was there and didn't worry about it. And they're just like strength training. And there was universal equipment. There was different versions of cable pulley, leg extensions, leg curls, on the wall mounted systems, a million different things. Again, rubber bands have actually been being used for years. Yeah. So that's just what I think. But yeah, that happens a lot. I find that if it's a plate loaded, it sort of gets a pass, like the hammer or the explode or maybe pendulum.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Pendulum for sure.
But if it's, just a pure selectorized machine with a stack that has a limit, if I'm a big, strong guy, I can already lift the stack. It's no good.
Yeah. It also, I think one thing that plays into it is who else is using this particular equipment. Barbells, obviously, cater, or like appeal to, like if I'm physically able to do a barbell squat, I'm probably, pretty healthy, pretty strong. Because, even if you're just squatting the bar, like you have to have a decent amount of strength that, the people who like to do barbell squats a lot of the time do, like they'd like to max out, which is, you have to be very technically proficient with the squat to be able to like max it out and like train to failure in a 1 rep max or 5 rep max or whatever it is, which, by the way, sometimes, we have this conversation and we try to be objective, but I think as hard as we try that, we're probably still biased toward, machine-based training, because in our opinion, it just on the whole is a little bit safer than training with barbells. But with that said, you can train to failure with a barbell safely. Set those safeties, in the rack so that when you reach failure, the bar just sets down right there. You don't have to drop it to the floor, like fling it behind you.
Yeah.
And spoiler alert, if you're, squatting 200, 300, 400 pounds, and you try to fling it behind you, it's not flinging. It's going to drop straight down and you could be seriously injured. So, have a spotter, set up the rack so that you can work as hard as you can and be able to fail safely.
And that's true for all of them, right? Whether it's just overhead press or a bench press,
Right.
or whatever, right? We can set those safeties. We have a power rack. Some of the modern ones have like a sling system versus like a solid steel bar, whatever the system is, put the safeties in place.
Yeah.
So you have a way to train safely. And if you have to bail, you're okay. And then obviously having a good spotter as well is important. If you have both of those things, you're probably going to be fine. And again, your technique is sound and all that other stuff. Jesse and I both spent years lifting free weights. So it's not like we've never used them.
But still do and still enjoy them.
Yeah.
And still recommend them. Yeah. And have our clients do them.
So again, we don't limit ourselves with that idea because again, if we have someone who's deconditioned or has any of these structural challenges that were discussed, what I'll do often is I might play with these free weights. But if there's any sort of bog down, delay, struggle, I just don't need to worry about it right away.
Meaning if you try to teach somebody how to do a Romanian deadlift with a barbell and they can't get the technique down pretty quickly.
If I can't get it down in one session or 2 sessions, I'm not going to waste their time.
Yeah.
Because there's other options that are safer and easier to learn.
Yeah. And just let's parse that a little bit because, again, if you're like stuck on this idea of, I gotta squat. It's the king of leg movements or whatever. And now you're like coach or, you're training by yourself and you're feeling like, I just can't get this down. Or your coach is like, no, this is like, it's taking too long to teach you how to do it. Like, that's okay. Because as you mentioned before, the only reason you would need to squat is if squatting is essential for your sport, e.g. powerlifting. Because in powerlifting, your goal is to do a 1 rep max of as much weight as you possibly can. That's what a 1 rep max is. It's just the absolute highest amount of weight you can squat one time.
All right.
But for the rest of us who aren't powerlifters, if we want to build strength in our legs, we can use any number of exercises. A leg press is for most people, perfectly safe lower body exercise that lights up all the same muscles in the lower body as the squat does. And it has the added benefit of not placing that heavy bar at the top of the pyramid, like Liam mentioned before. You're not loading your spine at all. You're loading from the bottom instead of loading from the top.
Yeah, and sticking with free weights and the kings of exercise, I would argue honestly, if I was going to choose a barbell exercise, that deadlifts would be a better choice, right? They do a lot of similar things. They activate even more stuff in some ways, and you still don't have that bar teetering on top of your spine. You engage in a different way. I feel like it's probably a little easier to learn, a little safer, still requires technique. And then again, you have the trap bar options, right? Other options. So if you want to worry about it, I would say go with that versus worrying about squatting again, unless you are competing in a sport that requires squatting. No biggie. And this is an argument that we, or sort of something that I mentioned quite a bit. And that's like at any given moment, up to 50% of the NFL, it uses mostly machine-based training, right? So you're talking about very high elite level athletes playing at the top of their sport, and some of them literally don't do any free weight training whatsoever in their training programs. And they're teams like Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Redskins back in the 80s when they won the Super Bowl multiple times, they were doing only machine training. And my argument is always, watch a game of football on a Sunday, and by watching these guys play, you tell me which one uses free weights and which one uses, machines. You can't tell the difference because they're all elite athletes. They're all performing at their highest levels. The tool that they're using is completely irrelevant. It doesn't impact their game negatively. I've heard all these ridiculous arguments. I've had coaches say, "Oh, I had guys who were strong, and then they went and did those machines, and then they got weak." Yeah,
that's ridiculous. Going back to squatting and deadlifting, I think just in terms of like overall program design, regardless of what tools you're using, we need to look at the total program. What's going on in it, and I think it's best, like, let's say you move well, you're a healthy person, no major injuries. I personally would recommend mixing it up and using a variety of machine-based exercises and free weighted exercises, and trying to be intelligent about the program design. And I'll give you an example of one problem that people run into with just program design in general is you look at the squat and the deadlifts. All right. Now, how you think about those two exercises is going to influence whether you're overtraining or not. And what I mean by that is if you actually break down the muscles that a squat is working, we think of a squat as primarily a leg exercise, right? Because it's the prime movers in the movement, meaning the strongest muscles in the movement are the glutes and the quads, right? Your thighs and your butt. But there are other muscles working as well. And the ones I want to focus on here are the spinal erectors, right? They're the muscles that support your spine. Now, when we train a movement to muscular failure, which we do recommend for each, as long as we're using good technique for each person, we need to train at or as close to failure as possible to stimulate new strength and muscle safely. That movement is not maximized by the strongest muscles. It's limited by the weakest muscles. And so in a squat, that would be your lower back. If you're squatting consistently, you're going to realize, wow, my back is really working hard. And that's right. As long as you're not using poor technique and causing pain, that is to be expected. It's the weak link in the chain, and it's always going to be that way.
Yeah. And again, when you're doing heavy of these movements, they are almost all essentially total body exercise, right? Squats, everything is working in a maximum squat. Everything is working in a maximum deadlift. Everything is working in a maximum bench press. Even your feet are pushing into the ground. Everything's turned on. You have, like Jesse said, prime movers, but it's not like everything else is just chilling and only your chest, shoulders, and triceps are working, or only your quads are working.
So let's say my pro, at TNT, we recommend doing 2 full body workouts a week with a couple of days of rest in between in general, right? But let's say I'm doing a split where I do like a push day on Monday and I do a pull day, meaning like my back muscles, right? My back and biceps on Tuesday. And then I do a leg day on Wednesday. And let's say on my back day, I do a deadlift, right?
Which is not unusual. People often include deadlifts on like quote unquote pulling day.
They do. And so a deadlift, again, what are the deadlift basically has the same prime movers as a squat, right? The glutes and the quads. And you're also working your trapezius muscles, right? Those upper back shoulder muscles and those same spinal erectors again. So, in the beginning of a program, if you're doing a deadlift on Tuesdays and then a squat on Wednesdays, you'd probably be fine for a little while. But as you build strength and as you are working harder from week to week and month to month, you may run into this issue of you're feeling like your lower back is overtraining. And that could be contributing outside of just, any sort of like poor technique in those exercises. Just the fact that you're training your lower back on Tuesday and then training it again on Wednesday, even if you're not realizing it, because you think in your mind, oh no, squatting is a leg thing. Right. It's also a lower back thing. A squat and a deadlift both work your lower back very hard. So my recommendation is if you're going to do a split like that, or even in our system, actually, like there are very few people who I will program a workout for and have them do a deadlift on Monday and then a squat on Thursday. Right. Because even those couple days of rest for me, lower backs and necks are just sensitive areas for lots of people. I don't think it's worth taking a chance on overtraining because there's just not an urgency to be able to squat and deadlift super well. The goal for most people is just to build strength. So my recommendation overall is just do one of those each week and just alternate from week to week. So if you're doing 2 full body workouts a week and you like to squat and deadlift, just do one or the other once a week. And then the next week, do the next one. If you're doing the split day, then do your push Monday, do your deadlift Tuesday, do a leg press Wednesday. And then the next week, do your squat on Wednesday and leave the deadlift out.
Yeah. And again, even if you're, the other thing, if you have the luxury of working outside, you're not working with a coach or you're not working in a real standardized system. We work within the confines of the calendar, right? So in our system, we're only open Monday through Friday at the moment. So that also limits the programming availability. But if you're out there training on your own and you're in command of your schedule, don't get locked into the Gregorian calendar and think I got to get it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or whatever. You can have a floating schedule. You could train every 3rd day or every 5th day, and you could pepper those things in, like Jesse's saying, but you have even more time. So you might be squatting on one day and then taking 2 or 3 days off and then doing something completely different and then taking another 2 or 3 days off. And then deadlift might be now 7 or 8 days away from that squat or more. We have some guys that are literally training one section once a week, which sounds crazy minimal, So we have guys literally do all their chest, shoulders, triceps on one weekend day, and they wait 7 days, and then they do back and biceps, and then they wait 7 days, and then they do legs and abs, right? So it's 3 weeks before they get back to chest, shoulders, and triceps again, or in each group, right? Which sounds crazy to a lot of people, right? How could that possibly work? But these guys are big and strong and continuously making progress. We can make progress working intensely with far less frequency and volume than people realize.
At TNT, we're solving a different problem than most people are thinking about. Most people, whether they realize it or not, are trying to solve the problem of how do I work out as much as possible? At TNT, we're trying to solve the exact opposite problems. How little can I work out and still get the benefits of strength training, right? And we measure those. We have an in-body scale, so we're looking at body composition. How do we try to make sure that muscle, lean muscle mass is staying near the peak? And we're also tracking through our cloud software to make sure that a person's strength is going up and up and up. So we are basically singularly focused on, are you able in this workout today to demonstrate more strength than you did last time, right? And you can do that with a barbell. You can do that with a machine. Just make sure you're tracking it. I think one final thing for us to talk about is just personal preference, right? This really means a lot. And I think especially within the high intensity training community, there are people who basically just totally disregard this because they think, you only should train on machines. And obviously outside of the HIIT community, people say like we literally were going to buy equipment from a person who told us, oh, you have a line of Nautilus in there, you should just throw all that stuff out and replace it with free weight racks.
So the direct quote, the guy, and I told him what we had, and he literally said, just throw that stuff away.
Yeah, which is, it doesn't make any sense because all of these tools produce the same result as long as they're used with good technique and an equivalent high level of intensity. So, but all the other factors aside, people, in my experience at least, people are going to work the hardest at when they're using tools that they enjoy using the most. When I plan a workout that has tools in it that a person doesn't like using, they're not going to be super enthusiastic about it. And frankly, I'm probably not going to keep that client long term, because who likes to do anything that they don't like to do long term if they're not, right? They're volunteering essentially to come train with us. That's part of my job as a strength coach is to design a program that this person really loves doing and will work hard at, especially because it's challenging, right? And just working hard at it it's tempting not to. It's tempting to run away from that. So we really, as strength coaches, have to look for and I think experiment a little bit to find the exercises that people really love doing. And that ultimately is what is going to drive the best results for people, is limiting the trainery exercises that you have to do. Find a version of that exercise that this person actually enjoys doing. Some person might not enjoy using the Nautilus abdominal crunch, but they might like doing a sit-up on the ground. Works the same muscles. We don't need to get stubborn or lazy as trainers and tell them they have to do the exercise one way. Find a creative solution to the problem.
Yeah. So remember, we only got 3 or 4 things we need to accomplish: pushing things, pulling things, level changing, a little bit of bending. And as Jim Flanagan, our friend and mentor, would say, you get stronger by putting resistance against the function of the muscle. And it doesn't really matter where that resistance comes from. So we find a way to apply resistance, and we can use bands, balls, bars, manual resistance. It doesn't matter. Create high tension in the muscle, just as many reps as we can safely. Write it all down and try to do it more than we did last time.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Boom, baby! What's up, people? Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Truth Not Trends. That's right here at TNT Strength headquarters, Truth Not Trends. Please, if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, rate, and review us on whatever platform you're listening to us on. And don't forget to share with a friend. You can find us on the web at tntstrength.com. That's right, TNT Strength now coming to you in person at 5255 College Avenue in Oakland, California. You can call the studio 510-768-5421. You can also text us
at 855-796-9905.
Or shoot us an email at contact@tntstrength.com. And whatever you do, stay off of that stupid blue bubbly bosun.
That's what you need to know.
Mixed and edited by Desmond McNeese for We Mixed It, LLC. Go to whatsoundsawesome.com.
Sounds like that's it, Cap. It wasn't even loud.